people started telling me that things started disappearing from JAG CNET. JAG CNET is the Army JAG Corps website about all the DEI stuff. And then someone I know suggested, Mason, you might want to do a FOIA request now before they destroy this stuff potentially or hide it or whatever. I got a response saying, we have received it. You should be hearing something soon. Didn't hear anything.
There are allegations that I trust. I'll put it that way. Allegations that I trust that a high-ranking JAG officer ordered their subordinates to ignore the FOIA you sent up, and they are going to piecemeal this until they could engineer this effectively across the entire force. They were going to basically just slowly indoctrinate people with more and more training and pieces of this and that, and just bleed into the force, circle around the toilet bowl until you finally have enough. And then it was going to be just a way of life. You're going to have cycled out an entire generation of service members, and you're going to have this entire pie put together, and you're not even going to know that you started here in sane world and you ended up in here in cuckoo world. They know nothing about cause and effect.
We have a gentleman who is running our elections who literally came from a dictatorial South American communist country.
Stealing, trafficking, we've got to put a stop to it. Hey, welcome. Today we're talking about a subject that I've actually been invested in for several years. We're talking about the JAG Corps, specifically the Army JAG Corps. And this is going to be a bit foreign to those of you who don't know who I am, don't know the work I've been involved in. And if you do know me, you've clearly seen me posting about this stuff and talking about the JAG Corps in depth. The JAG Corps is the Judge Advocate General. Okay, so what that is the legal advisory branch to chains of command at every echelon across the military. Every branch has them, and they advise from all the way from battalion level all the way up to Joint Chiefs of Staff. And what we've turned into over the years is what I consider a risk-adverse force that is apprehensive to make decisions and do anything without the approval of their legal team. And the problem with that is that if you're able to compromise that legal infrastructure and insert something nefarious in there, which I believe has happened, not just in the Army, but across all components. And I have presented a plethora of evidence to support this. But what happens is you start to reshape the force under something else. And what I believe that is a Marxist ideology through a lot of the queer indoctrination we've seen. We've seen it with the COVID mandate policy reviews. We've seen it with a lot of different things over the last several years. But with that said, I got the opportunity to talk to a guy. I met him recently, and that's who I'm interviewing today, Mason Weiss. And Mason is a former JAG officer himself. And we didn't know each other, had never met, never talked, but he, of his own volition, had concerns about his former branch, and he requested a FOIA dump, or a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act. And he sent that up to the Pentagon, and he was looking for information about the creation of FOIA within the Army JAG Corps. Got that information back. We're going to talk about that today, but there's a lot of really bad stuff that we've seen so far, and we've only touched the surface of this information. There's 7,000 plus documents. So with that said, I'm going to introduce you to Mason, and we're going to find out what's going on. Mason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam.
So tell us about yourself. Who are you, and how did you get into this?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a brief overview of my background just for anyone listening who wants to know where I'm coming from on this and what my concerns are and what my relevance is to this issue. I served, I first joined the Army really when I was 17. I joined the Army National Guard. That was in 1989. And I retired from active duty November 1st, 2019. So I served enlisted in the Army National Guard. Then I was in the IRR. Then I came after law school. I was in the reserves, Army Reserve, as a JAG officer for 2 years, and then I transferred to active duty, and I did 20 years on active duty. I retired honorably, again, 1 November 2019. Um, Most of my assignments were in what's called military justice. So I was a prosecutor or defense counsel most of my career. I worked in the Army Government Appellate Division. My last 5 years or 6 years on active duty, I was an instructor at the military police school where I trained Army military police and CID agents. And then my last 2 years before I retired, I was the what's called the group judge advocate. I was a legal advisor for an Army CID group, for Army Criminal Investigations Division. Um, so you're going to put some disclaimers and caveats on the show notes, and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
just one or two I want to go over right now. Just for,
Feel free, throw them in there.
yeah. So I'm
This
not
will
in.
go out on audio too, so just so everybody can hear it.
Yeah. So I am not. Nothing I am saying here is I'm not speaking on behalf of DoD, the Army JAG Corps. I am not endorsed by them, as this is going to become obvious. So I want to put that disclaimer out there immediately. Um, Also, as I've said in my notes, if I'm wrong about anything that I've asserted here, uh, I'm welcome. I'm welcoming anyone to come and correct me. And I've made that clear. I've posted about this on LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook anymore. I'm not on Twitter. I really am a private person in my life, uh, and I'm not looking for any recognition. That said,
Noted.
I want to be accurate with what I'm saying. And like I'm a veteran. I'm a retiree. I love the Army. I'm extremely proud of my service, and I'm proud that I was an Army JAG. And there's nothing from my past in the JAG Corps that I would, other than things that are attorney-client privilege, that I would ever not feel comfortable sharing with someone. There's nothing that I've ever done as a JAG that I would be worried about a FOIA request revealing. Again, I'm not talking about things from my personal life. That's a different story. Everyone has their personal issues. I don't have any skeletons in my closet really, but this is, I just want to put that out there that I'm not coming from a place where I'm trying to embarrass people or get them in trouble. I just want accountability for something that I saw that I found very disturbing. Um, Basically, I'm sorry, immediately after I retired from the Army is when I started seeing evidence of what we call this DEI or, woke stuff coming in. Um, I did not really notice that when I was on active duty. It might have just been starting to get filtered in, but it wasn't really something that I noticed in the military. It it was an issue that I had been following on, the news, about quote unquote DEI and things like that and the civilian world, but it was not part of my military experience at all. And I felt rather confident that that entire, whatever you want to call that, would never come into the military. I never thought that that was something we would ever have to deal with. And I kind of thought if it ever did, the first people who would be, you know, shutting it down would be Army lawyers like myself, because it's so, in my view, it's self-evidently wrong, immoral, probably unconstitutional and illegal, and just um, odious to good order and discipline. So,
Let me stop you right there. With the term unconstitutional, I fully agree, but tell us why. And tell us how it's different than just giving this idea that we're just giving somebody um the same opportunities as us. We're giving people of uh different skin colors or women the same opportunity as white men. How does DEI differ from that propaganda?
yeah, that's kind of the heart of the issue here. And I think the answer to that is we had, from the day that at least I came in the Army, and I think it was well before that, there was an understanding that everyone had an equal opportunity and that we didn't really care what your race was, what your sex was. Although the sex characteristic, I mean, women were discriminated against from combat arms until a certain time. But setting that aside for a moment, at least in terms of the Army JAG Corps, women have not been, to my knowledge, they haven't been discriminated against in the Army JAG Corps since maybe the 1940s or something like that. So 1950s, maybe 1960s. I mean, no one's lifetime who's been on active duty since I've been in or from well before then. So basically, what the DEI program, in my view, the reason that it's unconstitutional, um, and I'm going to just put a pin in here for a second and tell you something, which is that with the 7,000 pages of documents that I got from this FOIA request, there were a number of troubling things, and we'll go over them, which I think are unconstitutional or illegal or potentially illegal. Um, what's missing from there, and I understand why it's missing, is 65 pages of documents that relate to what are probably legal reviews or legal opinions about
Mm,
this program. And that is normal. They redact legal reviews because normally, if you do a FOIA, for instance, of something that a commander did in the military, right? The legal review, if there was one that his JAG officer gave him, is attorney-client privilege. So that's not going to be in there, and you're not going to see why the attorney, if there was a legal review done, gave the legal advice. That's not there. So I am appealing what was just given to me so that we can actually get a hold of these legal reviews if there were any. And the reason for that is it will answer the question, and it will either vindicate what I'm saying here, or it will invalidate potentially what I'm saying about whether these programs are constitutional, unconstitutional, somewhere in the middle. You know, I don't know because I haven't seen the legal reviews. I know what I suspect, um, and I suspect it's bad, but I don't know what I don't know. But getting back to your point, when you look through these 7,000 pages, there's such an emphasis on race, gender, race, sex, now sexual orientation. Um, and when you're dealing with somewhat of a zero sum game here, you have so many people that you can promote, so many people that you can allow in, and ultimately, if if you are prioritizing over and over again that we have to have more women, more minorities, more black people, more Hispanics, more gays, more transgender, whatever it is, then someone is not, so, that's coming out of someone else. And it's probably in this case, white men. They're the only people, from what I can tell, who are not included in DEI. So that's why I think
factual.
that's just the unconstitutional part. That's separate than, is this just a horrible idea because it's against the entire idea of military cohesion, good order and discipline, not drawing attention to people's immutable characteristics, not
Right.
focusing on things that don't matter. I mean, I could go on and on about that. What's bothered me about this whole issue, and again, I'm a retired JAG officer. I was not an infantryman. I didn't go to Ranger school. I'm not special forces. I'm not a helicopter pilot. I have no authority to speak about those things. And if those branches, for whatever reason, adopted DEI, I think it's terrible and it's something that should be exposed and rooted out. But I kind of hold them to a different standard because they would have been or should have been relying on their lawyers to tell them, hey, you can do this or you can't do this. Right. So I'm
Bingo.
not going to
Yep.
get pissed off at a 3-star general who's not a lawyer saying, look, this is what JAG told me or didn't tell me to do. I thought it was crazy. I thought it was stupid. But who am I? I'm not the JAG. I'm not the lawyer. I'm not the TJAG. Right. I have a different standard for my own. And I think it's important that we hold ourselves to a higher standard because that's why, as judge advocates, we believe we exist and we are relevant, is because we have this legal expertise and we're not regular officers in a sense. We kind of live in a different world, and we're supposed to do the right thing, regardless of whether it's popular, regardless of whether supposed to be policy or not. That's not supposed to matter ultimately. And that's what got me really upset about this. That's so once again, it's going to be in your show notes. I don't believe that this necessarily affected me or my career. So if anyone thinks, you're just mad, you have sour grapes because you didn't get promoted or you didn't get this assignment, that has nothing to do with it. Um, I was retired before I started noticing any of this. And as anyone who served with me could tell you, I'm very happy with how my career went. I would do it the same if I had it to do all over again. I retired as a major. I really did not want to advance beyond the rank of major in the Army JAG Corps. Probably a lot of people think I had no business going any higher than that. And that's fine. I had a
Okay.
great career. I'm proud of my service, and I tried to make a difference where I served. I just some things you just see and they're wrong, and you have to say something about it. When I started seeing on the Army JAG website, um, and after you retire, they take away your cat card, so you don't have the same access. But I was able to see a number of things on there in public view that I thought were very concerning. And it was the kind of thing that would have been laughed at 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
Right.
And now they're just openly talking about this. And I thought this was some kind of a joke about having, affinity groups for Black JAGs or Asian American Hispanic JAGs or gay JAGs. That was one thing. Training about quote unquote microaggressions. Um, just things that I was like, wait, I'm familiar with this topic, right? I mean, I read about this stuff from 2015 onward or whatever, even before about these woke colleges and this kind of nonsense. I couldn't believe that this was happening in the Army JAG Corps and that this wasn't some kind of a prank. Um, and then I asked people of mine, I still know a lot of people who are serving in all capacities. And I would ask them, hey, is this really going on? Is this what is this what I'm seeing? And they said, yeah, it's a lot worse than you think. And this is official, this is basically our official policy. And at a certain point, I can get into the whole story if you want, but at a certain point, I decided I need to I need to do a FOIA request and get all these documents and see what's there. Um, and it took literally 1 year to the day for them to respond to my FOIA and give me the documents. I wasn't sure I was ever going to get them or what was going to happen, but I
Yeah,
finally
we're
did.
going to talk about that in a
Yeah, we'll,
second.
we'll, we'll talk about that. But that's kind of my background. And again, just if I can add one more thing, um, I have not named anybody personally in any of my writing about this or any of my discussions. I know who these people are. You can find them. They're publicly available or publicly recognizable at this point. Um, I really don't care about them personally. I don't agree with what they did. For the ones of them who are retired, if they don't want to be involved in this issue anymore, that's fine. I think they should clear the air, but that's on them. For the people who are publicly identifiable in the FOIA request, I'm not going to name their names. I don't want anyone harassing them or bothering them. Make that clear. But I do believe, and we can talk about this. Of what I think the bottom line here is, I think they should be held to account for the decisions that they did. I'm really trying to make
Right.
it
And
forward looking, not backward looking.
and that was that I share the same contention as you do. Prior to 2000 and let's just say 20, even benchmark. You retired in 2019. I didn't see this stuff in large quantities across the military. You'd do a training session every once in a while. You'd hear some things here and there, but we weren't seeing the kind of stuff we saw under the Biden administration. And I was talking to a guy the other day who was giving me some background information on conversations he had had back in 2010, where they were
Mhm.
specifically talking about the need to create affinity groups. Um, and there was plans to put this in place way back in the day. If anybody knows what an affinity group is, I mean, these are groups that are specifically designed for socialist activism. Okay,
Mhm.
so when they implemented these in the JAG Corps, and you can see this was not just a side group. These weren't just Facebook groups. This was done under General Berger, who was the TJAG under his purview, and these were groups such as the Asian affinity group, the LGBTQ affinity group, and there were several of them, but they were actively sponsored and endorsed by the JAG Corps. And having talked to the JAG officers who are still serving that I have talked to, they told me that really these were stepping stones into uh, coveted positions within the JAG Corps. So if you wanted to go to these elite schools in order to get these jobs working in Congress or the Pentagon or wherever, you were expected to pay in by being a part of an affinity group or what have you. But folks had started getting groomed all the way at the down to first lieutenant, where they had started keeping an eye on these individuals and who was going to carry water, who was going to do their bidding in this realm. And so, really, the crux of it here, and I agree with you, is not to go after the individuals themselves necessarily. I mean, maybe let's have a conversation with General Berger, who oversaw all this, but it's the issue of your job as a legal advisor, your job as counsel is to read the law and interpret it contextually based on what it's supposed to say. It's not you injecting your emotion into it or your agenda into it or trying to engineer something or trying to, but that's exactly what was happening. And that's what we've seen. The just ridiculous amounts of stuff that I've put out there already
Mhm.
shows this very concerted effort to steer the ship in a certain direction. And I really do believe that, and I think it's in waiting. Yeah, let me give you two thoughts here. I think we cut the head off the snake before it could fully blossom into the monster that it's meant to be. But enough damage was done, and I know factually that numerous DEI offices did not delete their materials like they were ordered to under executive order. They archived them, which
Mhm.
tells me they're just waiting for a sympathetic administration to come back in and start this process back up, and they're going to come back at it swinging hard. So if we don't address these individuals appropriately who actually did this stuff, and some of this full-blown seditious speech that they've committed on social media and in groups amongst themselves. In fact, one of them was a group of majors at one of these schools who were addressing Trump, removing DEI program, and they flat out said the LGBTQ affinity group is addressing it right now, as in they're working behind the scenes to subvert and sabotage these efforts. And if you've seen what's happened in the last year, because this was a text from a year ago, if you've seen what's happened in the last year, I think they've been somewhat successful in holding off a full blown blockade on the DEI agenda here. We still see it across multiple curriculum, across multiple training venues. But no, I agree with you in what you say. The legal profession is meant to advise based on the law, not your emotion or agenda. So, anyways, but with that said, let's and I want to make this clear for everybody who's listening. I have inside knowledge because I've been talking to people for years and have sources within the JAG community that have the same concerns as all of us and are very aware of what's going on, are inside the mechanism and have been telling me and sharing information, nothing classified,
Right.
nothing that wouldn't be allowed to be public, because I would never, once again, I would never receive classified information. This is all unclassified information, but sharing inside conversations and documents that are still circulating within the community. And so I will be kind of providing context as you talk about the process of what you went through when you submitted this FOIA. So tell me
Y
about that. When you
Sure.
submitted this FOIA,
Yeah, and
what happened?
let me just throw a couple, more things in before I get to that, what before I forget. So one is, obviously, it goes without saying, or it should go without saying, I don't have a problem with any race, any sexual orientation, serving in the military. All right. As I wrote about. I was there. I mean, when I first came in the Army, it was a ban on homosexuality. I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was there when Ask, Don't Tell got overturned. I defended gay soldiers who were kicked out of the military. Um, you know, probably some of these same people pushing DEI now were involved in kicking people like that out back in the day and might have been gleeful about it. No pun intended. But I don't have a problem with gay people who want to serve openly. I've worked for
Sure.
my first mentor and supervisor in the Army JAG Corps was a female who is absolutely an unbelievable leader and attorney. Came to my retirement ceremony. I've worked for a lot of great women in the military. I've worked with and for great black people, black women, Hispanic people, Hispanic women, gay people. That's great. It's the idea that these any of this stuff should have been highlighted, focused, and used as a discriminator in any way is what really I don't like and what I think is bad for good order and discipline. And it just goes against
Right.
everything that I was taught day one of basic training, which is
We're
like,
all green.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
bottom
And we
line. We're
don't
all
care what your
green.
background is. We don't care what you came from. It doesn't matter. It's merit, right? And there are black individuals in the Army JAG Corps who succeeded well beyond what I did, and with almost large. I mean, I can think of one or two of different races and different genders, and so on and so forth, who I don't think were that great. And you suspect maybe they got it because of what we would have said was affirmative action or something. But for the most part, they got it because they deserved it, and they were great at their jobs, and they're well known, and they didn't need this DEI program to get to where they did because they were good lawyers and good officers. Um, so if somebody wants to try to argue here, which is what I think these people try to do, is they try to say, well, we're just talking about equal opportunity, or we're just talking about, no, that's not what they're talking about. Anyone who's been in the military since the 1980s knows that that has not really been an issue. So this is something
Facts.
new, it's something different, and it's something subversive, and it's all based on these language games where they will say one thing, but they really mean another. And
100%.
you can't argue. It's very hard to argue because if you say, "Well, you don't want to say I'm against diversity." What do you mean you're against diversity? Or I'm against equity. Well, yeah, I am against equity because I know what that actually means. But it's you got to really kind of define the terms here and what the programs are, or
Yep.
you're wrestling against somebody who's just like covered with oil because they're going to slip out of it and just try to play a game with you. And I'm not going to play that game because I know enough about this subject broadly. And then now that I have the slides, I know a couple of examples of how it was actually applied. So anyway, but to
Well, and
look,
I, I think overall people we're at a time and a period in our civilization now where the getting called racist or transphobe or anything else, it doesn't hold water. People are tired of it. They're over it. They're like, I know I'm not racist. I don't hate somebody because of the color of their skin. I hate how you have socially engineered and reduced meritocracy for the purpose of um, weakening and destroying our military or any other institution, really.
yeah, and
So, yeah,
also
I think people are over it.
by constantly harping on these things, you are actually aggravating it. Because I
Yeah.
believe if you just shut up about race and sex, unless, I mean, listen, if you have a legitimate EO complaint in the Army, make your EO complaint. If you really believe you were discriminated against because of your race or sex, that's fine. We already had a mechanism for that. I was involved in those investigations and those issues. But if you're constantly telling people you need to be thinking about your race, you need to be thinking about your sex, you need to be thinking about sexual orientation, then you know, it's not a good thing to do. Human beings are tribal, and the military is supposed to be a unifying, cohesive organization, not a tribal organization in itself, right? Where you're fighting each other or suspicious of each other. But anyway, we'll get back to my story. So basically, and again, I'm not going to say names here. These people know who they are, and they're welcome to contact me even now if they want to. But when this all started happening, I just noticed it. And when one of the TJAGs was getting ready to retire, um, and the new one was getting selected, I sent a email privately to the one who was getting selected. I knew him personally, um, and I just wrote him a friendly email and said, "Hey, I congratulations," and then I said, "I've been concerned about this DEI stuff for a while now. I hope once you come in, come into the job, you will put an end to this or at least address it and do something about it." And now this was
Dude
in,
ended up putting jet fuel on it, actually.
yeah, so this was before President Trump was reelected. So this is the time when I would say it would really take some moral courage to do something because you had the wind, you know, in front of you here.
Yeah.
Um, he did not respond to my email. Um, Whatever. I was like, okay, fine. Then after Trump got elected, I believe I think I've got the timeline right here, but I believe after Trump got elected, I sent another email, but I sent it to his official account and I mailed it to him at the Pentagon. So I know he had to get it. And I wasn't as nice in this one. And I just said, look, I really hope you'll rise to the occasion and get ahead of the curve here and address this issue. And again, no response. And I
Well,
don't want to sound
it
like I don't want to sound like a prima donna, Sam, but from my point of view, when you have a colleague who reaches out like that, you just, if nothing else, you just write them back and say, "Hey, Mason, it's great to hear from you. I understand your concerns. This is something I'm going to take really seriously." Right. And
Well, if you look at what he did publicly, he put out a big statement from the JAG Corps, and it was relatively around that time. It was in the November December timeframe before he was relieved. So I think he did respond to you,
yeah,
just rudely and not directly to you. He
right.
said, "Nope, we are fully going to endorse this and support it in every way."
Right. And that's when I realized that, wait a second, this person and maybe some other people, and again, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, um, because I'm not trying to ruin anyone's personal reputation. They can answer for themselves. I don't know what was going on in their mind. I don't know what they were thinking. Now, again, they're welcome to come on the show or talk to you or me privately. And if they can convince me that I got it wrong, I will sua sponte correct the record. But I'm just going off of what I saw and then what I learned from you, from other sources, and then what happened afterwards. So
Hmm.
what happened afterwards is, like you said, there was no response at all. And then um, things, people started telling me that things started disappearing from JAG CNET. JAG CNET is the Army JAG Corps website about all the DEI stuff. And then apparently the woman who was the civilian head of this DEI office was transferred out of there and sent to another job, where I believe she was subsequently fired from with when they rooted out all the DEI stuff. So from what I can tell, they basically sent her somewhere else to try to hide her. And then someone I know suggested, Mason, you might want to do a FOIA request now before they destroy this stuff potentially or hide it or whatever.
Good
So,
idea.
so I did the FOIA, and I did the FOIA. I got an email from the paralegal there saying, actually, your request needs to go to a different office. It needs to go what was called the I think it was Office of Professional Development or something like that. Something that wasn't there when I was there, and they forwarded it there. And then I waited, I waited. Nothing happened. Um, I kind of forgot about this, to be honest. I was like, well, they probably well, I really didn't know, Sam. I didn't know, and then something happened, which I don't want to elaborate on. Um, and then I decided to do the request again. So I basically cut and pasted and put second request and sent it in again. And once
And
again,
and I've seen that one, and that was like September, right? September
yes,
2025.
yeah,
Okay.
that was September. And again, people told me like, hey, they're violating the law here. They have X number of days to respond to you and either deny it, grant it,
Oh yeah.
or something. And they didn't do that. So I filed the second one. I got a response saying, "We have received it. You should be hearing something soon." Um, didn't hear anything. So at this point, there was uh, a new TJAG. Actually, I may be getting my yeah, there was a new TJAG came in, and
He came in
really,
shortly after Trump was, um,
right. Yeah, so I wrote him. Actually, I think I wrote him, to be honest, I think I might have written him before I even did my FOIA request. I think it was before I did my FOIA,
the
but
new TJAG?
the newest one, the one who is in there now.
Okay.
So I did the
Bobby
same.
Christine, Major General
Yeah,
Bobby Christine. Okay.
yes. So I sent him an email. Congratulations, welcome to the job. I think, I can tell you exactly what I said, but I was basically like, look, could you please get rid of the DEI nonsense? Like, this is a no brainer now, right? It doesn't, in my view, it doesn't take any moral courage when you have the SecDef basically on day one saying he wants DEI gone, and he's pretty adamant about it. Um, and again, I kind of expected, well, I'm going to get an email back saying, "Hey, thanks for your concern. I'm working on it," or it's something I will think, just common courtesy. And again, I mailed this as well, so I know he got it because I sent it snail mail and regular mail, or at least I know he got it. I assumed he got it. No response.
At
Um,
least his chief of staff got it. We can be
I
certain
believe
of
someone
that.
got it,
Yeah.
and then eventually, um, it was suggested that that I file a congressional complaint. Um, Before I filed the congressional, I emailed the TJAG again and said, "Hey,
And that
look,
was recently, right?
that was, yes, not too long ago. Well, this would have been in November, I believe. Wait, hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in November. So
Okay.
I either October or November. I October or November. I emailed the TJAG again and said, "Hey, remember me? I'm the one who has the issue with the DEI stuff. Um, just so you know, I'm about to file a congressional complaint to get my FOIA request answered." Right? I don't want to embarrass the JAG Corps, or I'm trying not to. Could you please do something about this? I'm summarizing. Again, no response. And I said, if I don't hear, it was like a Monday, I sent the email. I said, look, if I don't hear from you by Friday, I'm going to file my congressional. And again, all it would have taken was a one-line email back saying, "Hey, Mason, I'm sorry they didn't get back to you. I'm new here. Let me find out what's going on. Please, if you want to file your congressional, but could you give me a day or two to try to figure this out?" And Sam, I was going on, what would I want if I was still in the organization? Because, again, I wasn't too high ranking, but I was high ranking enough to have to deal with stuff. And you always would prefer to handle things like gentlemen. And before you burn someone publicly or, go above their head, you try to give them an opportunity to make things right. And I still felt, and I do still feel loyal to the organization. So I'm not trying to, embarrass anyone. But again, if you're not going to respond to me the second time, and your predecessor got fired potentially for his, well, whatever, his stance on this issue, I was out of patience. So I filed the congressional. Around the same time, just by happenstance, I reached out to someone I know. I'm not going to say who it is, but someone I know who's a very high level, um, and expressed the same concern and just said, "Hey, look, I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want you to have egg on your face if this thing ever comes out. So could you please help me get this moving? If you want to be involved. If you don't want to be involved, that's fine. I don't want to rely on a personal relationship and think that I'm getting special treatment. But again, I don't want to embarrass people needlessly." Um, I believe he did something to try to help, he or she, but I don't know what exactly it was, and they didn't respond to me after, so I just kind of left it at that. Um, Finally, and again, and you can talk about whatever you're comfortable sharing. Eventually, I finally did get an answer. It was 1 year to the day of when I filed my FOIA request, and it was a dump of, it was nicely organized of, I believe about 7,000 pages of documents
Hmm.
that I have been going through and finding some things in there. And well, let actually take a moment to tell you. So one thing is,
Yeah.
out of all the documents in there, there's stuff that I would say is completely batshit crazy and ridiculous, but sprinkled in there is some stuff that's actually good and common sense and useful. So I got to hand it to them a little bit. They did manage to incorporate some sound psychological principles and things like that into all of this garbage. And
You're a better man than me. I'll give them nothing.
okay, well, I would just say again, when you're talking about this whole DEI thing, there is a kernel of truth to this whole thing, right? There's a kernel of truth. It's not that
Every
it's true.
good bit of propaganda is going to be nested within
Right,
soft speech and
right, right.
factual
But
statements. Yes.
it's what you do with that kernel of truth and where you let it lead you. That's the problem, and that's that's what's bothered me about all this and about what I'm reading is you're saying a bunch of half truths do not equal the truth. And
Right.
anyway, so that's kind of the overview of the FOIA. And since then, people, former colleagues of mine, have contacted me um, privately and told me, "Oh, hey, I was there when this happened, or I was there when that happened." Some of these are people who I didn't even really know before. I just knew them by name, and I'm kind of like, "Well, did I get this wrong? Am I exaggerating it?" And most of what I've heard is, "No, it was worse than you thought. You only saw what was like publicly available on JAG CNET. I was there when these things were happening, so I can tell you
Yeah.
more about it." Yeah. So that got me more concerned. It's like, no, this isn't just an innocent mistake. This isn't, I'm less charitable now than I was before.
Well, let me jump in there really quick and add some insight on that. It was not an innocent mistake. First of all, the entire program, but let's just talk about that last year. So my inside chicken, I'll be careful how I say this, but there are I don't know how to word this without saying too much.
Mhm.
There are allegations that I trust. I'll put it that way. Allegations that I trust that a high ranking JAG officer ordered their subordinates to ignore the FOIA you sent up and to, once again, allegation, not report the FOIA to Major General Christine.
Mhm.
Um, that needs to be investigated.
Yes, I'm.
And I think some folks are working on that right now. But if that's the case, that is criminal, along with a lot of other things. So that is my insight on your FOIA process. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. It's been suggested. Let me just put it in the passive voice that I do a FOIA request on the processing of my FOIA request.
Hmm.
Because the cover up is worse than the crime, which
Yes.
again, Sam, something that's really bothering me about all of this is that I'm only asking for information for the most part that they were openly bragging about for years,
Right. What's
right?
the issue?
They exactly. So, in my view, if you're proud of what you did, you don't have anything to hide. In fact, you should say, "Yeah, let me give it to you. And we're sorry that this program got taken down because it was such a great thing." And, one of the things in the FOIA response that they gave me, there was a letter that accompanied it, and it explained that we took out a lot of stuff because it was legal privilege, but they also took out a lot of stuff because they said it had the potential to cause embarrassment. Um, and among those things,
Imagine that.
yeah, well, among those things is they blacked out the names of, I believe, anyone below 1-star general. There's a couple of full-bird colonels whose names are in there. And then there's a couple of times where I think they might have just not done a careful redaction and I was able to see names. And then there's, of course, ones where I know who these people are because I can figure it out. Because I have the original source documents and they have their names in there. So again, I'm kind of like, well, what's the potential for embarrassment here? You were applauding these people. In fact, hold on just a second. Yeah. There's I was joking about it. I think I'm going to put myself in for this is the DEI Champion Award. So they had a DEI Champion Award that they were doing for the person who did the most for DEI. And, I've sent this to you before. The winner gets to go to the leaders conference for the Army JAG Corps.
Yeah.
I might have you put
Um,
me the award for, I think I am doing a lot for bringing attention to DEI.
I
Um,
thought that was satire when you sent that to me, by the way. I thought you were joking when you sent it, and
I
I had to keep
that's
looking at it.
again, that's kind of how I feel when I'm reading through a lot of this. Is this a joke?
It's
Because
like bad Babylon B posts.
yeah, and I mean, it's just it's kind of like it gets worse and worse the more you look at it, and I I think what might be going on here. So I also asked some people, um, are these people true believers, or are they just were they just playing along here? You know, like was the JAG Corps doing this because they had to? And it's one of these things where it's like, hey, we're not happy about this, but this is what we have to do. We're going to do it, and everybody just accept it, right? Like when Don't Ask, Don't Tell got overturned, there were some people in the Army who, yeah, they weren't thrilled about it, but it was kind of like, hey, this is the way it's going to be now. But to my disappointment, several people have told me, no, no, Mason, I was at the meetings, I was at the leaders conferences, I was at what we call the Article 6 visits when the general officers come and visit the installations. I saw the emails. These people bought the woke mind virus hook, line, and sinker. Um,
Yeah.
and in fact,
And
I believe in some respects, the JAG Corps might have even been, I hate to say it, ahead of the curve on the DEI stuff. Like, I believe they might have been trying to push this stuff before the rest of the Army was even doing it, or the rest
oh,
of the
I
DoD.
100% they were. Absolutely. I mean, that the JAG Corps was the number one institution that was targeted under the Obama administration. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into all the evidence of that, but when they decided that there needed to be an overhaul of the military and its leadership, and going after the last bastion of sanity in our federal institutions, because everything else had already been attacked at that point, they knew exactly where to go, and that was to the folks who arguably have more power than anybody in the military. Because once again, at the beginning of this, I said we are in a risk adverse force that won't do anything without legal approval from their JAG. And so what better way to re-engineer the military than to make sure that everything funnels through them? And here's the contention I'll make about this. Like you said, it was public information. This was a program that they were allegedly proud of. Not even allegedly. They were very proud of it.
Oh,
They were very
absolutely.
open on the face. They were proud of all this stuff. I think that the majority of them knew how insane it was. Like you said, batshit crazy. They knew how insane everything was in as as an entire pie. So what they were going to do is they were going to hand out slivers, and they were going to piecemeal this until they could engineer this effectively across the entire force. They were going to uh, basically just slowly indoctrinate people with more and more training and pieces of this and that, and just bleed into the force, circle around the toilet bowl until you finally have enough. And then it was going to be just a way of life. You're going to have cycled out an entire generation
Yes.
of service members, and you're going to have this entire pie put together, and you're not even going to know that you started here in sane world and you ended up in here in cuckoo world. And so when your FOIA came in and they had to produce all the documents that showed what was happening, it was like, oh crap. All of this together looks really nuts. I mean, anybody with a brain in their head can look at it. I don't care how communist you are. You can look at it and be like, yeah, dude, if you got a wiener, you're a man. That is just the way it works. Like, that's
Yeah, and
reality.
that's a related but a separate topic that also got me upset about all this is the entire transgender madness in society and in the military. And I know the Army JAG Corps played a large role in that years ago, and then continued playing a role in it. And that is, ironically, that's just an issue that I find very interesting and bizarre for a number of reasons. And when I saw what the military was doing with it, and then the Army JAG Corps' involvement, that kind of it was like everything kind of lining up, and seeing this common
Mhm.
thread here with this insanity. And of course, it's in the slides. You can, I believe,
Oh, yeah.
we can talk about what some of these slides say. And again, I
We're
wasn't,
putting this out, by the way, just so everybody knows. We're putting the entire
yeah,
tranche of 7,000 plus documents out there for everybody to review. We're not going to piecemeal this out. We're not
No.
doing this for clicks and likes and trying to get our X bucks and all that. This is going out to everybody, and you can write your own stories and go through this insanity for yourself.
Yeah, hang on, I'm just gonna get some fresh air. And yeah,
Oh, you're good.
I want to say again, I'm sorry. I don't want to sound like I'm being apologetic. I really want because I know that there's going to be people watching this who know me, who served with me, and I still care about this community. You know, I was joking with someone that they have. I don't know if they're going to keep having it, but they have an alumni weekend that they started this year, where former JAGs or retirees can go to the JAG school for a weekend, and they're going to have like a get together. And I said, you know, I hope that if they have it next year, that I can show up, and they're not going to block me at the schoolhouse doors like, you know, George Wallace or something.
Right.
You know, like, hey, you're not,
Ooh, Mason. No, no,
you know,
you're
and people who know me. Again, I don't want to self-aggrandize. It's just interesting that I'm one of hundreds and hundreds of people who could have done this, um, who know that this is wrong or knew it was wrong. They've retired or they're out. And I'm frankly just, I can't believe that I'm the only one who really wanted to walk over this minefield, because I know that many, many, many people. I was just talking to a friend of mine today who's probably going to reach out to you or reach out to Matt Osborne. And he was telling me stories. He's like, Mason, let me tell you about something that I saw between 2004 and 2006. And he's totally upset about this issue as well. And I believe, in fact, can I tell you a quick anecdote that I think will.
sure.
Sure. So when I became the JAG officer for the CID group, I had to go to some training, and there was a MP general there who was at the time the new head of CID, and really nice guy, not a lawyer, has nothing to do with DEI, but he told this anecdote that I thought was so interesting, and I think it kind of explains a little bit of what's going on here. And I was telling him when I was deployed in Iraq, some of the things that I did, which wasn't anything really important, but one of them was having to do with detainee operations. And then he told me, oh, he said he was actually in charge of Camp Buka. I believe he was in charge, or he was number two or something like that. Camp Buka was a huge detainee facility where Iraqis were during the Iraq War when we picked up insurgents, right? And he just mentioned this anecdote to me and several people that he was talking to. We were at a microbrewery, and he said, "Yeah, when I was there, he said we had the 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 detainee facility divided into cell blocks of sorts, and there was like 500, I don't know, 100, 200, 500, whatever the number was in each cell block of these detainees." And he said that they noticed something very interesting, which was that out of the 100 guys you had in there, if you had more than a certain number, I don't know what the number was, let's say it was 20, right? If you had more than 20, then all of these detainees would be praying 5 times a day, wearing their beards long, and acting very, very Muslim and very devout. And he said, if you got below 20 or whatever that number was, if you got to 18, they were all playing soccer and beating the shit out of the fanatical religious guys. And they didn't give a shit what they had to say. But he said there was
Wow.
a number, and they always wanted to be under that number because then they could control the population. And I believe that that is kind of what happened here. Is there was a breaking point where people were willing to, you know, when I came in for the first number of years, or where you were in, where if you tried to sell this stuff at a OPD or an NCOPD or a conference, you would have gotten jeered at in the crowd and told you were an idiot and
No, yeah,
off the
without
stick.
a doubt.
Right. But at a certain point, the number of fanatics in the room got to where the other 90% were like, okay, I don't want to get my head sawed off, you know, figuratively speaking. So I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to
Yep.
talk about this because I know it's crazy, but I am not going to be the person who is that guy who speaks up and gets sent to Kwajalein Atoll or wherever, or, you know, White Sands Missile Depot. I don't know. You know, like, you know, you know,
I almost got orders there. I feel
right.
you.
Okay. So that's what I think might have happened here. So I'm happy to be the one to walk over the landmine for everyone else. I would like to think that more JAGs, current, retired, reserve, National Guard, are going to come forward and, especially now that the documents are coming out, and say, yeah, this is what happened. I was there. And again, I've been told that there is, they are concerned about leaks and about this information coming out. And in fact, I'll just, gonna read we're gonna review a text message that I got because I want to get this right. I was
Silly to say leaks when it's literally public information in the pursuit of your day-to-day unclassified job within the military. It's not a leak. It is
exactly,
what you were
exactly.
doing on taxpayer dollars
Yeah,
for allegedly the defense of
one of
this
my friends
nation.
said they're worried about the leaks. He said it's about their leadership's failure to hold people accountable. They don't want the truth coming out. And and again, my thing is, if you're a proud DEI warrior, like the people in these slides, be a proud DEI warrior. Either resign from the organization, retire. Some of these people are
That's it.
already retired O6s who are GS-15s or GS-45s or whatever. They're probably also 100% VA disabled. More power to them. You know, you can go and be the dean at Oberlin College and, or one of these places and, give your classes about microaggressions and privilege, stuff that's in these slides,
Yeah.
talk about, BIPOC and, you know, too many white men being in this or whatever. But this has no place in the army, has no place in the military. And now that we have an administration that finally put an end to it, I don't know why you're still in this organization. Um, if these are really values that you hold to. Um, I'm sorry, I forgot what was your last question before I went on the tirade there.
No, I don't think there was a question. I was just stating my opinion on the matter, and you kind of broke in there with an analogy that was very on point. But yeah, I fully agree with you. If this is something you're passionate about, as many of my friends were convicted and passionate about not taking an experimental drug that was not
Right.
FDA approved, and they had religious or other objections to doing so, they either retired when they had a chance or they were forced out of service, but they were not going to, um, they're not going to, there's a word, dang it. I hate it when I mess up the words. Uh, they were not going to, I'm going to have to edit this.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I can.
Break their conscience. We'll go with that. They were
Yeah.
not going to, dang it. Words are hard today, but they were not going to violate their conscience by doing something that went against their service. And so if you are so passionate about this, which you claim, and you just say that there's so much institutional racism and
Yeah.
bigotry and all these other issues, and then resign and then go on the news and tell the whole world about how this evil racist force of tyrannical people are conducting all of this misogyny and racism and everything else against all these folks. Do that, but don't continue to hang out and and operate under the guise of you're this super warrior of moral conscience while you're at the same time trying to hide information
Right.
from your taxpayer funded job. That's insane to me. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, and maybe I can go to the end for a second, and then we'll back up, and I'll tell you like what I would like to see happen here, and then
Yeah.
I'd like us to talk about some of the things that are in the slides that are particularly egregious, and then again, you're going to make them public. I invite whoever out there, look through them yourself. You can do a control find. One thing just popped out at me the other day that I had looked right over, and it was hiding in plain sight. But if I was king of the world, which I'm not, but if I was, this is what I would do now. If the TJAG would listen to me, this is what I would say: is you need to come out, write a letter, put it on the website, and basically explain in no uncertain terms that DEI is over in the Army JAG Corps, that it was a bad idea, we shouldn't have done it, And you need to force the people who are still in the organization, who are senior leaders, to apologize to the members of the regiment for their role in this, and
I
to
like it.
admit, look, I made a mistake. We all make mistakes. I have believed things before that are ridiculous and that took me years to understand were not true, and that I fought tooth and nail, and that I would have defended. They say you're not you defend something the most, a belief the most, that you're about to give up. Um, and there's nothing wrong with admitting I was wrong. Now, if you're not willing to admit you were wrong about this and you still believe in this and you're still a DEI warrior, then, like we said, you need to leave the organization or be fired. But I'm all for, I was telling my friend, the same friend today, I said, I remember hearing this story, not to make a horrible comparison, but apparently back in the days of the Spanish Inquisition, they, before they started burning people at the stake, the monks would come through the town and they would have like a 30-day period or something where people could self-report for being a heretic. And if you self-reported and apologized and recanted, you're fine. Okay. If you don't do that though, and they find out that you were practicing witchcraft or, secretly practicing Judaism, which I guess would be in my case, well, then you're in a lot of trouble, right? Then you're going to get. So I would just
Yeah.
say, you remember the whole amnesty box thing, when you're at the range, and it's like, hey, you took any rounds and you're not supposed to have them, put them here, right? And I think
Right.
the JAG Corps needs to have an easy out here, because I do think that a lot of these people did not have the moral courage at the time to resist. And now it doesn't take a lot of moral courage to do the right thing. And if you can't admit you're wrong and apologize, or stick to your guns and not apologize when the wind is at your back, then you have no moral courage, in my view. You can't say, I couldn't speak up because Biden ordered it. No, no, no. We're in a different regime now. You guys are wanting to hide this shit, basically, and black people's names out. So don't tell me that you
Yep.
don't, that you can't do this. You can't. So what I would like is basically an apology. Now, the current TJAG, I don't believe he has anything to apologize for. He came in afterwards, and to my knowledge, he has nothing to apologize for. I don't believe he was personally
To my
involved.
knowledge as well.
Right.
I agree with that statement. I'll give him
And
an
I've
L.
heard listen, again, this isn't personal. I've heard he's a great guy. I'd love to, I don't drink anymore, but theoretically, I'd love to have a beer with him if I still drank. Um, but he needs to send the message out, and he needs to call the people, the senior leaders on the carpet, because there are several of them. They're on the slides. I'm not going to name them. And again,
Right there in your office.
Yeah, and I actually know
Anyways.
some of these people, Sam. I don't know them well, but I've met them before. Um, and they were nice to me. Like, I had pleasant conversations with them. These are not people who I have any personal grudge against. And listen, I was not an '05. I was not an '06. I was not a general officer. In one respect, it's easy for me on my high horse after I retire to say I would have done this and I would have done that. Maybe I would have been a chicken shit and I would have gone along with all this also at the time because I was scared. But you know what? I want to put this in the past. I want there to be an accounting. And then if you are one of these people, if you're currently a 1-star general or an '06 or a senior executive or GS, whatever, then hey, just come clean and say, listen, we can make a learning experience out of this. This is when the JAG Corps got off track, did the wrong thing, and we learned from it, and we're never doing this again, and we're sorry. And that's all I really want. And then maybe some retraining on what is, hey, we don't judge people by anything other than the content of their character and their performance. We don't give a shit if you're black. We don't care if you're white. We don't care if you're female. We don't care if you're gay. It's one standard. And that's if you're a good, in our case, a good officer and a good lawyer, not whether or not you meet some box that we're going to obsess about. That frankly, you're never going to have any organization that is free and fair, that is going to numerically represent every race and sex and sexual identity. It's just not going to happen. People, for whatever reason, there's different preferences. There's people who at different times are in different places who can't be in a certain position. And just all the wasted energy, Sam, look at all those slides. How many man hours did the JAG Corps waste on all this bullshit that they could have
Oh
been
yeah.
trying cases, doing advocacy, um, having their senior leaders get up in front of a fucking courtroom and argue a case instead of, hiding behind their desk or whatever. There's so much lost opportunity
Well, that
here.
was my contention. I mean, the amount of work that was done here, their amount of content was staggering. And I'm like, the same thing. How many hours did you guys invest in creating this nonsense?
Yeah,
It just
they had a whole office, and they had the training and and then if you can see in the slides, it basically says like we're pushing this out to every course we teach. Like we're embedding it in the training for military
Mhm.
judges, for senior officers, in the basic course and the grad course. Um, just like one example of if we could talk first about the affinity group thing because we've mentioned that a couple of times,
Yeah.
and okay, so I was joking with my friend today on the phone, and I said, "Look, can you imagine? Like they have this Asian American Pacific Islander group. All right, now, um, and one of the things they talk about in the slides is the reason we need these affinity groups is because if you're a minority in the JAG Corps, you need to have I believe it says this that basically it's important to have a mentor who you can relate to. Do you recall seeing the same kind of thing in there where
I
that's
can't say for certain, but that sounds on par, so I won't
yeah,
argue with it.
I believe I saw that. I might be mixing the words up a little bit, but it basically one of the justifications for the affinity groups and they talk a lot about mentoring and having and of course I know these people. I saw their names, the people who were the heads of the Asian American one or the black one. And I'm just thinking, I was joking to my friend today, like I've served with some officers who were Korean Americans or American born Korean. And I served with others who were Filipino background and
Mhm.
others Chinese and others who were Japanese. Now, can you imagine telling a Korean American, let's say I'm still in the Army and I'm a colonel and I'm a JAG officer in my imagination, obviously. And a new captain comes to me who's a Korean American. And I say, instead of me being a mentor to you, I'm going to give you Colonel so and so. He's not actually Korean, he's Filipino, but you guys, you kind of have similar facial features. Your food
Right.
is probably similar. I bet both of your parents probably forced you to do well in school. And most importantly, you're not white. So we're gonna give you a mentor. I mean,
I
this
believe
is
that's called a macro aggression, not a
yeah,
microaggression.
yeah. I mean, but
They would lose their mind.
that's kind of the iron fist and the velvet glove here. Is what you're basically
Yeah.
saying is that there's something fundamentally different about an American who's from an Asian background than someone like me. That they should have a mentor who superficially looks like them. May have nothing in common. They don't speak the same language, native
Right.
language. They don't eat the same food. They don't hell, they might have been historic enemies. If you in the case of like Japanese and Koreans, they were not on friendly terms. But this is what we're signaling. Um
And it partisans and divides the chain of command because I don't care what your skin color is or what your sex is or whatever else. As the commander, you are in command of that element. If I am under you, I am subservient to you, and I don't get a special pass or special mentorship based on the way I look versus you look or anybody else looks or what I have in my pants or anything else. There is no special consideration in that regard because you are my commander and you have legal authority over me. So
right,
to
the purpose, like
insinuate that
it's not necessarily a command relationship, but as you know, the
no,
purpose
no,
of
I
the
agree, but that was
program
just yeah,
and this affinity group is to get these people in a pipeline where they are where they are getting advanced in the ranks where they can continue this type of grooming. Um,
hmm
and that just really rubs me the wrong way. I mean, I told my friend, like, can you imagine if I said to someone like, hey, um, you're a white Irish Catholic. I don't think, you should have this black army colonel um, mentor you. I know I'm not going to say names because I know Colonel so and so. He's also an Irish Catholic, so I think you guys would be well together. You're both Boston Celtics fans, and this is obscene. And it's one thing if people want to seek each other out on their own, and that's fine. You know, you want to seek out a mentor, you want to make friends with people who have something similar to you. I don't have a problem with that. And people will sometimes naturally gravitate to people who have a similar background to them. But that is not that should not be part of the organization and their institutional culture to encourage,
Right. And it
right?
shouldn't be part of your process for climbing the ladder and getting to higher rank and better positions and everything else because you participated in these groups. Once again, if you want to create a Facebook group and do your thing on the side and go do whatever, do it. But
Right.
you don't get special consideration for top jobs because you participated in these groups. And just the entire thing is insane. It's unconstitutional. You don't get to have special consideration because you did something outside of your job purview and you had these immutable characteristics that defined something that you get to move up the ladder with. That's anyways, continue.
Okay. Well, so and again, I would say this thing with the affinity group is or groups, that's probably the least offensive thing that I found in these slides. Like that's not even that's just something that kind of stuck in my craw.
Yeah.
But that's not okay. That's not the crux of what all is wrong here. So now maybe we can take a minute. And again, I'm going to give the same disclaimer. If I'm interpreting this wrong, you're welcome to correct me. If you are an active duty JAG officer or leader, TJAG, 1-star, whoever, call me up, email me. If you want, I will keep our correspondence private. I won't name you and shame you. I will correct the record. All right. But you better have some evidence that I'm getting this wrong. Not it's your opinion that I'm wrong.
Right.
Some
Because it's
actual evidence.
if it's what we're talking about yesterday, then yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear in black and white.
Yeah, so why don't we just start with that, Sam, which is that I'm trying to look for the document here, but what one of the things that I noticed yesterday going through it is that and let me just give some background for people who aren't going to understand the language necessarily. There's a thing called the GOSC, and what that is in the Army JAG Corps. And again, if I'm wrong on any of the verbiage here, I stand corrected, but it's basically the general officers of the Army JAG Corps get together and approve assignments. Okay. Before people get sent to assignments, they have to, you have a kind of a career manager. They put you in for something and then it has to go through several rounds before you get your assignment. And the Army JAG Corps has an AGR program, Active Guard and Reserve. Now, I don't know if what I'm about to talk about also applied to the active duty assignments. Maybe it did, and the documents aren't in there. Maybe it didn't, and the documents aren't in there. Maybe I don't know. But in terms of the AGR program, from what I'm reading, and again, this was in the fourth document. I believe it's in the fourth one. Sam, you can check yours as well.
Yep,
Uh,
and I posted them yesterday on X and Instagram.
Okay. So it says, let me get this language exactly right. They're basically asking, good morning, would you please complete a DEI review for the attached FY23 AGR PCS slate? The names of the soldiers getting jobs are as follows. So here it has, all of the names of the soldiers, and then the head of the DEI office at the time. I happen to know who this person is. And again, I heard he's a really nice guy. Okay. So,
Oh, they're always nice. They're
okay,
always nice people. Nice.
yeah, always nice guy. He writes back, basically, okay, what's the suspense on this? And then he says, and I'm just going to read it. I couldn't have made this one up. He says, Amiga, ODEI is not aware of any DEI matter concerning any of these folks. So I I don't know what that means. Um, I guess the best case scenario, Sam, is it means that there's no allegations against them that they violated DEI, but
They did not put a list of 20 people on there
right,
who were field grade officers and they were suspected of violating DEIA. This
Right.
was 100% a, is this person good to go and meets our billet requests for
Yes.
a black, a white, a Mexican, a whatever,
That that's
filling a
that's what I
collective rainbow.
that's
Yes.
that's what I believe. And again, I asked this other person who may have contacted you. I said, "Is this legal?" And he said, "No, not to me." Okay, and again, if Sam, I'm going to tell whoever's watching. I know they're watching. If this is legal, explain it to us. Release your legal views. Ask for the authority who can or not declassify, but release this. Just ask them to release it. I want to see the legal review that says that it's okay to consider race and sex and DEI factors on assignments. Okay, so that's one. Another one, and I'm not going to pull up the documents, but I believe it's in the same thing, is in regard to JAG selections, accessions for new JAG officers for several years in a row, and for what's called the FLEP program. The FLEP program is Funded Legal Education Program. And that's a program that the Army JAG Corps has that selects officers from other branches and actually now NCOs who want to become Army lawyers. And they send them to law school, pay for their law school, pay them full-time salary while they're in law school, and it counts for their retirement. So it is
Pretty excellent deal.
it's a very competitive program. And from
I
what I
bet.
can tell, the language in there for who is going to be considered for selection, because again, there's a board that meets, there's many, many, many applications for this FLEP program. It's extremely competitive. Um, Many of the people who get into this program, they are already West Point grads, or they're people who won a 4-year ROTC scholarship. So you have a lot of people who they didn't have to pay to go to college. Now they're not going to law school. They're getting paid full time while they're in law school, and it's counting towards their retirement.
Hmm.
And they owe 2 years for every year. The way it usually works out, and again, I'm saying all this for the benefit of people who don't know. Anyone in the Army JAG Corps, what I'm talking about is nothing. This is no
Yep.
big news, right?
We're
But for the
talking to an
benefit of
unknowing audience.
for the unknowing audience, this is a program where many of the past TJAGs have been FLEP officers. Um, it's kind of hard. I wouldn't say it's impossible to screw up your career as a FLEP. I know a few, I know a couple of people who've done it deliberately or not, but you're more or less, you know, going to make 05, 06, potentially general officer. And hey, to their credit, they select a lot of good people. They also select some people who I don't think are that great, but they do select a lot of good people. Well, I believe that the instructions flat out say you will consider DEI factors and um, representation, blah blah blah. That language is in there. Now,
Wow.
what I do, and again, if I've got this wrong, you people know who you are. I invite you to correct me on this and say, no, that language, you're getting it mixed up. It doesn't mean what it says. It means something different. We sent you the wrong form, whatever
They'll
it is. Go ahead
try.
and tell me. Go ahead and
I'm
tell me.
sure somebody will try.
Someone's
But
right. And
yeah.
again, Tim, I have no dog in this fight. I wasn't a FLEP. I was never going to be a FLEP. I came in the Army JAG Corps in 2000. None of this stuff affects me. Okay. I need to be very clear on that. I have no axe to grind here personally. Now, when you look at the actual assignment selection, I'm sorry, not assignments, the promotion boards, I have all those records are in this data dump as well. Now, that has a bunch of stuff in there about diversity and all that shit. But then it also has a paragraph in there that says, hey, nothing that we say here should make you think that we have a quota or that someone should be picked because they're of a certain race, blah, 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 blah. So they have that disclaimer in there. Now, that disclaimer is not, from what I could tell, it's not in the initial selection board for new JAGs, and it's not in the FLEP board instructions, but it is in the regular promotion instructions. However, as I was telling another person the other day, when you see language like that, what I see or what I hear subconsciously is, hey, there's a big blue elephant. I don't want you to think about the big blue elephant.
Right.
About the big blue elephant, because you're not supposed to consider anything about a big blue elephant, right? So,
Well, I call it foot stomp policy. And in the
yeah,
military, and I've applied it to a lot of those things, but when a commander wants a a subordinate element to comply, but doesn't want to put it in writing because it might not look good, what's he
Right.
do? He looks at his commander and he stomps his feet and he says, am I tracking? You guys following? Like, you get what I'm saying, right? Okay, make it happen. And they understand officer evaluations are going to be coming out, and how well did they adhere to that foot stomp and that eyebrow raise? So
Well,
that's
right. And
exactly what it sounds like to me.
that's what it sounds like to me too. And it sounds like it's giving them plausible deniability,
Hmm.
where if someone were to sue because they weren't promoted and say, I want to see all the board documents. And by the way, there was another friend of mine reminded me to say this about 25 years ago. There was there was affirmative action being done in the Army JAG Corps, and there was a lawsuit done. I believe it was by a bunch of lieutenant colonels who did not get selected to colonel, and they won the lawsuit, as far as I understand, and
Mm,
were promoted. They had like a special board or whatever because they showed that they were doing this shit and they weren't supposed to. Okay,
yeah.
and there was and they relied on an article. I prefer not to say her name just because I know who she is, but I've had no contact with her and I don't know what side she's on this. Although I
Yeah,
do,
you're fine.
but she wrote kind of I believe she wrote an article in the Army Lawyer or in Military Law Review that basically shut this whole thing down, and these officers relied on her research to for their lawsuit. Um,
Mm,
and I apologize if I'm not getting the facts exactly correct there, but this has been, I would just say this, there's been an issue before in the Army JAG Corps where they used racial or gender factors and got smacked down on it. Okay.
yeah.
So, so I believe that's what we have here. So basically what we've got so far, Sam, that and again, I invite other people. I have a life outside of FOIA requests. Um, you know, what I've identified is you've got that AGR board or AGR assignment thing, which again, you know, if I'm an AGR officer and I want to go somewhere and get an assignment and I find out, well, Mason, you didn't get it because you're a white male and, we gave it to someone else, you know, I don't think that's fair, right? Like, I mean, I can't help that I'm a white male. And I think that anyway, also, if I'm a FLEP, again, I'm not giving legal advice here, but if I'm someone who applied for the FLEP program and I didn't get picked up, but they did pick up, a minority or a minority female, I don't think that's fair, Sam. I don't think that's right. Um, and again, I have not been tracking promotions for the last number of years, and however, if someone is a white male, for lack of a better identifier, and they didn't get promoted the last several years, based on what I see in these slides, I would have a serious concern that my race could have been a discriminatory factor, um,
Right.
or or at least in if it wasn't explicitly considered, it was implicitly considered in some way. Because again, if you're constantly beating this DEI drum, I mean, you know what the way the military works. People all kind of march to the tune of the same drummer. So if you're
Yes.
constantly being told something, at a certain point, you don't need to give someone an order. They know what's expected of them. They know what the
Right.
commander's intent is, right? And if you're constantly telling people in the JAG Corps, we don't have enough minorities, we don't have enough women, we don't have enough blacks, we don't have enough Hispanics, we don't have enough gays, whatever the hell it is, they're going to get the message, right? And okay, so we've got those things, and then another problem that I saw. Um,
Well, and I'll jump in there really quick
yeah,
and I'll
please,
say
do.
that
Please say whatever you want to say.
beyond the individual not getting promoted or not getting the assignment or whatever, and in the individual harm, let's look at the so what of this. The so
Right.
what is you multiply this across an entire force whose job is to defend the nation, and you start to have this fracturing where you have all these elements that have this moral injury because they know that they've been overlooked for immutable characteristics when their merit and which is judged through their evaluations and how they performed in other areas is top notch, and they're getting overlooked. And I know folks that this has happened to. I
Yeah.
talked to many of them over the last few years who have been in this exact position but it starts to have this deleterious effect across the entire formation, the entire military, where it starts to degrade the cohesion and it starts to divide people within the populace from each other. So instead of everybody being green, now you have people that are just like, I know it's not your fault, but it pisses me off that somebody that had the same immutable characteristic as you're this or that, uh, got a job over me when I was far more qualified than they were, and now I'm just upset. And so it starts to fracture that cohesion at the unit level, and it's no longer this number game and this, okay, a person here, a person there, whatever. It starts to break down the foundation of good morals and discipline within the military at large. And the effort here, what I truly see is an effort to degrade and destroy uh, the the fighting element that protects our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I mean, that is the overall goal
Well,
that is trying to be achieved here.
yeah,
Anyways.
and I'll just add, and again, these aren't original ideas of mine. I'm stealing most of these from other people, but it really it has another really deleterious effect, which is that it makes you start to question whether the people who are getting promoted really got it for merit or not. Whereas before,
Hmm.
I didn't think that. So when I came in 2000, there were several um, black, I mean, that I know of. There may have been more, but I can think of a couple of black Army JAG colonels. Um, and I didn't think for a second that they got promoted to colonel or they were where they were at because they were black. Um, I just thought they were good. And that's what everyone thought, right? And the same thing with the women for the most part. The first supervisor that I had, like I said, a female, and she had the reputation, well earned, even at the time as a major, of being probably the best criminal law attorney in the Army JAG Corps. And no one who's ever worked with this woman would tell you for a second that they think she got to where she did because she's a woman. All right. And in her case, she never for a second played that card or acted like uh, she was oppressed or some nonsense like that. But what you do by putting such an emphasis on this is you're basically telling people, like, hey, you really should question whether Colonel so and so got that promotion because he's a good lawyer and a good soldier, or is it because we have a DEI concern that we're not promoting enough blacks and so and such and such and such. And now you're making people suspicious who normally would not be suspicious, right? And that's to me, that is horrible. I don't want, I would not want to be, um, I mean, just to, again, make it personal. I'm Jewish. Okay. I would not someone, I would not have wanted someone to think, oh, the only reason they promoted Mason Weiss to lieutenant colonel or colonel is because he's a Jew. And because if we don't, he's going to make a stink about it, or someone's going to um, complain that there aren't enough Jews getting promoted in the Army JAG Corps. I actually use this as an example. Funny to speak, I've met a number of Jewish lawyers in the Army JAG Corps. Um, we didn't have any kind of official club. I know of several who made it to '06. I don't know if there's ever been one who's been a general officer. There might have been. No, there is. Actually, I can think of one who was a general officer recently. He did not get promoted to a second or third star. I would not say for a second that I think that had anything to do with him being Jewish. All right. M- I have, I mean, maybe it was, but I sure as hell don't think so. I never faced any anti Semitism in the Army JAG Corps. But if people had been trying to give me that message from day one, like, hey, Mason, we're going to have a Jewish JAG affinity group because you guys need to stick together and you need to be mentored by someone who, has your background and experience. And, we're looking at the actual number of of the population, and we're looking at the number of again. I'm just freestyling this right here, but I'm
Hmm.
almost willing to bet that if you look at the population of attorneys in the United States and you do a demographic sample or demographic, what's the percentage of Jewish attorneys in the civilian population, and what's the percentage of Jewish attorneys in the Army JAG population or the other JAG Corps? It's a lot less. All right. So if I wanted to make a
It's fair.
yeah, if I wanted to make a bullshit DEI argument, I could complain about how there's systemic racism against Jews and in the Army JAG Corps, and look at we have this discrepancy because if you look at the Department of Justice or you know DA's office, you're gonna I could make this all kind of bullshit, and I know damn well this has nothing to do with discrimination. This has nothing to do with anything. These are just choices people make in life, and there's only so many slots, and there's only so many people who can get promoted, and you know, it's an adversarial somebody wins and somebody loses in the promotion and the assignment thing. And unless you've got really damn good evidence that you were discriminated against based on your race, religion, or sex, then for the organization to function, the idea has to be you weren't discriminated against, right? Not that there's implicit bias that we need to train you out of, not that we need to put you in an affinity group, not that we need to bombard you with these stupid woke ideas, right? That is just not the way to handle this
Yeah.
entire thing.
And as you said earlier, we already had equal opportunity policies in place to guard against that very specific thing. We didn't need any of this stuff. It was never a thing that was in short order to protect somebody from some sort of discrimination. We had very solid things in place already. So this was very, very clear to me an overt effort to come over top with something else at stake, something else to the something else being this
Right.
Marxist ideology through sexual and queer indoctrination, which is a hallmark of the movement. I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
And that getting to the sexual thing, see how to say this. So I didn't even realize until I got the FOIA that there was a quote unquote JAG Pride affinity group that I guess is, there or was there. I guess it's shut down now, but it's there to advance the interests or whatever of gay JAGs or queer JAGs. Um, and one thing that I again you can find this in the slide. I'm just gonna you know read one thing. And again, I wasn't at this presentation. I don't know how this was received. I'm going off of paper, okay? But just to give you an example of where their heads were, it says, um, so this was on. I'm sorry, now the date is from today or from when I got it. It says the stigma of don't ask, don't tell were not gone after the repeal. LGBTQIA plus individuals have been told for too long to internalize their stories as opposed to sharing them. The network provides a safe space. The network, I guess, is the affinity group. PPTO is the personnel plans, training, and operations. That's the branch of the Army JAG Corps that does assignments. So it says
okay.
PPTO, and then it says parentheses, moving same-sex families during adoptions or to new locations where maybe a transgender child may not have access to medical care common, i.e., people no longer want to hide themselves. And then it says December 2019 graduation from OBC. Are same sex spouses noted other? I don't know what that means. Project inclusion issue. Okay, so, my reading of
Yeah, I'd
this,
like to know what project inclusion is.
yeah. um, so again, um, it is a concern of the Army JAG Corps, of their assignments people, that you may have, and again, I don't know any of these people, but that you may have same-sex couples, um, or I guess other couples who have a quote unquote transgender child who needs to have access to quote unquote medical care, which, I mean, I could go on for hours about this topic, but
Oh yeah, me too.
yeah. So again, this is something that 20 years ago, you would have been prosecuted for in the military if you did something like this to your child. All right. Or
Yeah,
you allowed something.
butchering your child, right? Yeah, taking your child out and having them sexually maimed, and
Right.
we are making uh, special considerations for military couples to do so by
Right.
putting them on installations where they'll be localized with this
Right.
kind of
Right.
care. I use
Right.
care in quotes because it's not care.
right. And again, said it would be one thing if the Army JAG Corps just said, you know what, we don't, this is crazy, but we don't want to have any part of it. We make no opinion. If the law is you can do this to your kid, I guess you can do it to your kid. But they're actually saying, like, hey, from what I'm told, we need to be worried about this because because our gay or our LGBT um, service members, this is a concern of theirs. So in terms of retention, in terms of recruiting or whatever, this is an issue that we need to be accommodating or we need to be aware of. The other one was sorry, I printed some stuff out here. Um, about being a good ally, um, so on and so forth. Just stuff that I don't really believe. I mean, I'm all for tolerance. I understand don't ask, don't tell what was overturned, and that's all that there should be. There doesn't need to be any emphasis on, in my view, on anyone's sexual orientation. I don't need to know about it. I don't care about it. If someone wants to tell me they're gay, I had gay soldiers work for me. I worked with gay soldiers. I don't give a shit. If there was some reason that I needed to know, feel free to tell me. But other than that, I certainly don't need to be reading about it in JAG newsletters or being told that I need to.
Well,
Again, I'm not a religious person. I imagine I know some JAGs who are religious Mormons or religious Christians, Catholics, Protestants, maybe Orthodox Jews. I think it's wrong to be teaching them in classes that they need to affirm LGBTQ stuff. I just don't see that as professional. Um,
no, agreed. Well, and I'll say the the bottom line here is that if we don't root this stuff out, if we don't, and for those of you who think it's been rooted out because Hegseth put out a tweet that said DEI is dead, I assure you it is not dead. It is lying dormant and it's waiting for somebody to pour water on it. And
right.
this will happen
Yes.
depending on what administration takes over. If we don't root this stuff out and identify it and shine a light on it and make the public aware of how insipid and devious they have been with their behavior and their efforts to cloak and mask and conceal and piecemeal this stuff out and re-engineer the force, you're going to have an entirely different military. And I know some of you on the left are excited about that, but
Right.
I'm telling you, for those of you in the belt buckle of America, who, what are we looking at here, by the way?
Yeah. This is the what I was just talking about.
Oh
How?
yeah, how to be more inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Um,
also, yeah. Go ahead.
no, just saying, if we don't, if we, those of you who think the military is still the military that your grandfather served in or your father, I assure you it's not. And if you wanted to have any semblance of being
Right.
that military again and not being engineered as an element that will overthrow the United States for its what they call racist constitutional ideals, then you better take this stuff seriously because this goes well beyond just some training manuals here and there and some gay speech. This is deadly serious. They are trying to re-engineer, propagandize the entire military at large. So,
Yeah. And I'll say, uh, it's a couple things there. I mean, I'm not even sure that everyone involved in this is or perpetuating it. I mean, there are people who definitely know what they're doing. Probably people in the Army JAG Corps who know what they're doing.
oh, 100%. I let me jump in on that and say I fully agree with you. Most of this stuff is done by the unwitting, the we'll just call them the useful idiots, whatever, but people that, and my camera just went out. So I'm looking at you from over here now because my little box over there
Okay.
just blipped out. Anyways, most people think they're doing the right thing and they do things based on some sort of moral principle that they feel is right. And that is how most of this has been hijacked and
Yeah.
done. The true architects of this stuff know what they're doing and they rely on
Yeah. The useful idiots.
this, yeah, the useful idiots to do their bidding for them. So I agree.
Yeah. And that's why, again, I don't want to make it personal because I don't know who the sheep are and who the wolves are necessarily here. I have my suspicions. My name is spelled with two S's, by the way. I just noticed it has WEIS. You might want to just put the second S on there, or Maybe that's my
I'm not
fault.
sure if I can change that or not, but I'll take
Okay.
a look at it.
Okay. In case someone, Googles me and, but anyway, I think that I want to be charitable where I can be charitable to whoever I can be charitable towards and just say, hey, listen, you didn't understand exactly what you got caught up in here, and I think that's how some of this um, initially got into society to begin with is you're thinking like, hey, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where if you were a gay kid in high school, you got the shit beat out of you and teased. And that's not right. We shouldn't do that. The military, I do think that overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a good thing to do. I think I've had friends in the military who are gay, and I don't think they should have had to hide who they were. But I think with the rest of this issue, especially with the trans stuff, they basically hijacked people's compassion receptors to try to smuggle all this
Well put.
and and make you think like, hey, you don't want to, you don't want to bully these people, and you don't want to be mean and exclusionary and whatever. That's what we're talking about here, right? Or you don't want to be a racist. Um, so uh, I think that there are some people who don't, they don't have the time to really dig in here and read all the books and do all the research.
Right.
And then also, I think you have some people who, I mean, I don't really consider myself a liberal anymore, but I would have, 20 years ago. You've
Hmm.
got, I think, some people who are just like, look, if the people who are against this stuff are people that I don't like, then I'm going to be in opposition to them. So, if I personally don't like Donald Trump and Donald Trump is against trans and kids, well, then it must be good to trans kids because I hate Trump and I
There's a
can't.
lot of that.
I think there
There's
is a
a
lot of
lot
that.
of that,
I think
unfortunately.
that some of that probably seeped into all of this DEI stuff
Yeah.
where it's like, hey, there are people who are classical liberals who are against DEI, and you can find those people, but unfortunately, it's mainly people on the right wing and Republicans and conservatives who have been the loudest against this. So they're the people that may be getting publicly identified with all this. So then you have people reflexively saying, well, oh, no, no, DEI must be good because the people I don't like are so much against it. They're not looking at this objectively. And then also, if you were not in the military, you don't, you just don't get it. It's a separate society, it's a different culture, and it's not a democracy. It's not, it's egalitarian in some sense, but you can't have it run the way the rest of society does. So I think the DEI stuff is horrible for the rest of society, for civilian society, but as bad as it is there, you're just putting it on steroids when you put it into a military organization. Oh, and before I forget, Sam, my interest in this has been the JAG Corps' involvement in DEI, but through talking to certain people and doing some research, I think that this is really the tip of the iceberg. I think that there's a whole lot more that someone could find about how this entire DEI stuff came into DoD, whether there was any legal reviews done of any of this stuff to begin with, and if there weren't, why not? So I think that this might be a
Yes.
bit story than I knew that I was looking at.
Well, and I think we'll end it there with
Yeah,
that because that's exactly where um that's where we're going to look next. There's a lot of folks that are interested in this right now. There's folks that that I know, they're writing about it, they're looking into it, and we're going to keep we're going to keep pulling the lid off this issue until everything is exposed because this cannot be allowed to come back in the future. It will destroy us.
yeah,
They've got all the tools.
yeah. And I hope, Sam, I hope you and I've talked offline. We're both loyal Americans and loyal soldiers, and I feel like we're doing the organization. They might not like it, or they might not like the way it feels right now, but we're doing them a favor because apparently they're not able to do it or willing to do it internally on their own to do what I think needs to be done. So if outside pressure is what it's going to take for them to do the right thing, then um, I'm happy to be part of it however I can. And if this fails, then I think we're seriously screwed.
Yeah, I agree.
like, like, this is bad news if this can't be rooted out for good.
Yes. Well, I will say this, and I'll look into the camera that I can't see anything on right now, just so I have the good recording. But I will say, if you are interested in this topic, understand that we are hanging all the files. We need you to dig into this. We need the citizen journalists to come out and start digging through this material and start opening up this story, because it's much bigger than we can expose on our own. Um, and if you want to know something, reach out to Mason on LinkedIn. In fact, do you want to give your at on LinkedIn, or
I think
just
it's
leave it alone?
Mason Weiss. You should find me. I kind of have a gag account. It says that I am the director of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and mandatory fun at the
Excellent.
at the Senator Elizabeth Warren Museum of Native American Heritage.
Okay.
Is my house. But anyway, yeah, if you find me,
Excellent.
you can find me there. I'm happy to talk to you. And again, if you are a current or former JAG, if you want me to keep our conversations private, I will do that. I won't reveal who you are, even if you are current leadership. You know, I'm trying to be a gentleman about this. I am sarcastic, and and have a little bit of a dark sense of humor, but I really am trying to do the right thing here, and that's my goal.
All right. Well,
Okay, man,
there you have it.
thanks for having me on. I
Hit,
really appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Hit up Mason. Don't leave, by the way.
Oh,
We gotta
sure.
finish the recording on this. But hit up Mason, hit up me. You know where to find me. And yeah, we're gonna keep digging into this issue, because once again, it has not gone away, and we need to make sure it does go away. So with that, see you guys next time. Take care.